This is a sports catastrophe production. Hey there, hello there. It's Jeff Diamond welcoming you to another sports catastrophe on this day. And on this day, June the 24th, 1987, a sad day in the CFL as a franchise had to fold. Now you're thinking, by the photo, it's like the Montreal Alouettes. You're thinking, wait a minute, the Alouettes still exist. How come they folded? Well, I'll tell you the story. So anyway, the original Montreal Alouettes got into the CFL in 1946. They named themselves after Alouette, a work song about plucking the feathers from a skylark, which was a symbol of the Quebecois, the skylarks. But it's also from a fighter squadron, the French-Canadian squadron, Alouette. In 1949, they won their first Grey Cup, defeating Calgary 28-15. Thanks to quarterback Frankie Filchuk, who would actually be indicted for gambling problems in the NFL and all that. He was suspended between 1947 and 1950 from the NFL because of the scandal from the 46 NFL Championship. He was allowed to play in Montreal. The 1950s were basically the start of the Alouettes being decent and all that. The legendary quarterback Sam Etcheverry throwing passes to Red O'Quinn, Hal Patterson, and Pat Abruzzi. Basically, they had the most dangerous offense in the CFL. And from 54 to 56, they reached the Grey Cup in 3 straight years. But unfortunately, their defense would fail them more than their offense, as they lost all 3 times to the Edmonton Eskimos. All that. So, anyway, the Alouettes in the 1960s were not really that good and all that. Mostly after a bad trade after they traded Hal Patterson and Sam Etcheverry, 2 icons in the Montreal era, to Hamilton for Bernie Filoni and Don Paquette. Basically, Ted Workman, the owner, made the deal without consulting with the GM. But the deal did fall apart because Etcheverry signed a new contract with no trade clause, and Etcheverry was kind of a free agent. They did trade Patterson for Paquette, though. Etcheverry would actually play in the NFL with St. Louis and San Francisco. St. Louis/Arizona Cardinals. Wow. Filoni would stay in Hamilton and become one of the best quarterback receiver combinations with Hal Patterson. Alouettes had a dark decade and all that. They didn't even have a single winning season. They would play in the Autostad Stadium for 8 years, which was actually the temporary stadium for Expo 67. There was not a lot of good attendance, and Montreal was on the Montreal's waterfront. The Owls were 2-12, but a new owner came, Sam Berger, who was a former owner of the Rough Riders, the Ottawa Rough Riders. He made big changes. He decided to give Red O'Quinn and Sam Etcheverry jobs back with the organization as GM and head coach. The team would change their uniforms to be predominantly green with red and white trim. Green? Really? Green? The change was huge, and the Alouettes somehow got to the 1970 Grey Cup even though they were 3rd in the East. They shocked Toronto and Hamilton in the playoffs. They would play at Exhibition Stadium against the Calgary Stampeders and crushed the Stampeders 23-10 for their first Grey Cup in 2 decades. That's amazing. So anyway, Sonny Wade would become legendary for his quarterback abilities. The 70s were the decade of the Alouettes, if you will. The team went to 6 Grey Cups and won 3 of them. As weird as it sounds, the Alouettes were their 6 Grey Cup appearances in the 70s. They met either Edmonton or Calgary. Edmonton was in 5 of them. Montreal decided to change their jerseys in 74 to red, white, and blue. They moved out of the Autostad and into Stade Olympique, or Olympic Stadium, if you will, midway through the 76 season, and attendance shot up. They won the Grey Cup on home turf against Edmonton in what was called the Ice Bowl 41-6. A Grey Cup record 68,000 fans were at Stade Olympique. And they actually averaged 59,000 plus at the Big Hill during the regular season. Wow. After Berger retired from things in 1981, he sold the team to Nelson Skelbania. Basically, the guy who was known for owning the Indianapolis Racers and selling Gretzky to Edmonton. The flamboyant Skelbania wanted to sign some players from the NFL. And he signed people from the NFL. Vince Ferragamo, James Scott, David Overstreet, Keith Gary, and Billy Whiteshoes Johnson. Basically, they were rating NFL teams for his own personal gain and all that. And made the CFL a bit of a threat because the NFL probably thought the CFL was no threat. In fact, Tom Cousineau, who was supposed to be with the Buffalo Bills, actually signed on in the CFL. But the ALouettes crashed. They were 3-13 with all those players and all that. They actually did make the playoffs because in the top three because Toronto was 2-14. They lost to Ottawa 20-16. But as it sounded, Ottawa was 5-11 that year. And they actually ended up going to the Grey Cup and almost shocking the Edmonton Eskimos at Stade Olympique in the 81 Grey Cup, but Edmonton won by a field goal. Only by a field goal. Skelbania decided to sign to oil magnate Pat Bolin. Yes, that Pat Bolin, who would later be the Broncos owner in 84. George Allen, who was an iconic NFL coach, actually was named ALouettes president. So anyway, George Allen could have taken control of the ALouettes, but he left the club because Skelbania had some issues and all that. Berger tried to force Skelbania to relinquish the team to him as payment for debt and all that. The team would be forced to join the league, be folded to the league in May of 1982. The CFL actually anticipated the collapse of the ALouettes. There were some potential suitors, Charles Brofman being one of them. It was huge. Yep, and Brofman got the CFL franchise, got the Montreal franchise and all that. Skelbania said that I still have the name, logos, and intellectual property. So basically, Brofman decided to operate his team under a new name, the Concords. Basically, it was a reference to the fan revolutionary Concorde passenger jet and all that. So, yeah. The Concords would actually inherit the franchise history of the ALouettes from 46 to 81 and all that. Needless to say, the Concords really sucked and all that. But the demise happened. The ALouettes would have a big blow as it was found out that Carling O'Keefe actually tore up its deal to serve as the CFL's TV sponsor. So basically, the TV deal meant that Montreal couldn't get the money and all that. So June 24th, they had to fold, just a day before the 87 regular season. Thankfully, though, the league did prepare for this and had an 8-team schedule up and all that. Winnipeg would move from the west to the east to take the ALouettes spot to balance everything out. And the CFL held a dispersal draft for the ALouettes players. All that. So that was fine. However, in a sense of true identity and all that, Montreal had no CFL team after 87. But that would change in 96, thanks to the demise of the CFL's US-based operations and the fact that, all this happened. They got their team. Baltimore was the most successful of the CFL teams that were American and all that. But once Baltimore got their NFL team back, as in taking Cleveland's away, they had no need for the CFL team, despite the fact that they just came off winning the Grey Cup and all that. So Jim Spanos, who was a Montreal businessman, managed to purchase the Baltimore Stallions and move it to Montreal. So basically, all the Baltimore Stallions became Montreal Alouettes. And the Alouettes went into a period of superiority, if you will. The past few years have been rough for Alouette fans like myself, but basically, yeah, it was shocking. But you know what? The Alouettes are still a great franchise in CFL history, like it or not. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.